many of you went to the bathroom, did your business, and you flushed that toilet, and that waste of yours took off and went somewhere, and you'll never have to think about it again? How many of you had that experience this morning? Weren't you glad that you flush it? You should be giving your toilet a big hug every morning and say, thank you for dealing with this. And it just, where it goes, no one knows. Out it goes. There are countries, and I've been to them, where you flush your toilet and then walk out in the street and you see it going by. And you go, oh my, I've seen that before. I am not joking. I am not joking. Some of you have been to those countries and you know what I'm talking about. We have it so well.
Welcome to Church of the Rock from Winnipeg. Stay tuned to this week's thought-provoking message from Pastor Mark Hughes.
All right, so today I'm carrying on in the series I began weeks ago called Pieces of 8. And I'm taking words that rhyme with 8 and for some reason preaching on them. And of course, week 1 was invigorate, and then collaborate, and then emancipate, and then anticipate. And last week was illuminate. And this week, it's appreciate. When it comes to the word appreciate, here's a little fun fact for you. The word does not appear in Scripture, not even once. But it substitutes a better word, and that word is thanksgiving. It's used 103 times depending on the translation. And just literally dozens of times all the way through the Scripture commands us to be thankful. In fact, King David wrote an entire psalm about it. Some of you will know it. It's Psalm 107. He said, oh, that men would give thanks, for the Lord is good, and his mercy endures, say it with me, forever. And not only did he say it once, he repeats it all the way through the psalm. It keeps on saying, give thanks to the Lord, for the Lord is good and his mercy endures forever. You know what I think? I think when David wrote Psalm 107, I think he had just finished doing something really bad. That's what I think. He was reminding God that his mercy endures forever. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this word called appreciate. We're going to look at thanksgiving. And we're going to look at one of the most powerful verses on this in Scripture. And it's found in Luke chapter 17, and we're going to start at verse 11. You're going to be familiar with it when I read it. Here it goes. Now it happened as he went to Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And then as he entered a certain village, there met him 10 men who were lepers. And they stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And so when he saw them, he said to them, go show yourselves to the priests. And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. Now one of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned and with a loud voice glorified God and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. So Jesus answered and said, were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? Were there not found any who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, arise, go your way, your faith has made you well. So let me give you a little context of this story. So it says that Jesus is going from Galilee to Jerusalem. Those of you know that the geography of Israel, it goes like this. You have Galilee in the north where Jesus was from and he lived. Then you have Samaria in the middle, and then you have Judea underneath that, where Jerusalem was. And it says he was traveling from Galilee to Jerusalem, so that meant he had to go through the region of Samaria. And in fact, the way it's worded, it says he was traveling through the regions of Galilee and Samaria. And many scholars believe that what he was he was in the borderlands between those two when this story took place. He doesn't say what village he is at, whether it's in Samaria or it's in Galilee, but we know that there was this group of lepers there. And we probably know from this story that this group of lepers, these 10 lepers, were probably made up of both Jews and Samaritans. Because here was a story on leprosy. There was no more debilitating, reproachable disease than leprosy. When people had leprosy, they were, for all intents and purposes, they were cursed. Not only did it destroy literally your physical body, but you were now an outcast from society because you were contagious. And you were not allowed to live in community. You were not allowed to associate with people of your culture, your race, your village. And in fact, if you did come near them, you had to walk through the streets going, unclean, 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 so people would stay away from you. So really it was insult to injury. And so what we find out from this story is this group of lepers, probably made up of Jews and Samaritans, because they were outcasts from their own people, they were actually coming and living together in community. And it says they were standing afar off, so they weren't near Jesus, right? We see them as standing afar because they're ostracized, they're outcasts of society. Now, I'm probably, or possibly, the only one in the room that's ever actually been to a leper colony. There might be the odd one. But I didn't even know, and here's a picture. It was in India years ago. I'm taking the picture, so I'm not in it. But we stumbled upon this leper colony. I was so stupid, I didn't even know that leper colonies still existed. And it's a story for another day, but I want to tell you this. It was one of the most devastating things I'd ever seen in my life. To see these people that have a completely preventable, completely curable disease, that were living with this horrible bacterial problem that was literally destroying their bodies. There was fingers falling off and toes falling off, ears falling off, eyes that were infected and gone, people with rags wrapped around their head, oozing sores. There was children in this. And to be in this place, it absolutely broke my heart. And like these 10 lepers, they were ostracized from their world, and they had to live in a colony away. And like I said, I literally stumbled on it, and there I was in the midst of this leper colony that I didn't even know still existed in today's day and age. And so when I read this story in Luke 17 about the 10 lepers, I read it with maybe more empathy than most. And I imagine these 10 men, and I imagine what they're going through, the heartache and the reproach and the derision and the pain and the suffering that they're living with. And then we see this picture of them standing afar off. They had to. They couldn't come near. But notice this, that they seemed to know who Jesus was. And they said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us, crying out to Jesus. And Jesus does something peculiar. And he says, go your way and show yourselves to the priests. Why would he tell them to do that? Well, I'll tell you why, because Leviticus chapter 13 says that if someone perhaps, and it happened on rare occasions, was healed of leprosy, they had to go and show themselves to the priest. And the priest, and only the priest, could declare them as cleansed and healed so that they could re-enter society. So Jesus merely says to them, go show yourself to the priests. He doesn't lay hands on them. He didn't even go near them. He just sent them on their way. So it says they turned and they went their way. And it says, as they went, they were cleansed, all 10 of them. And then one of them returns. And he comes and it says he glorified God with a loud voice. And he threw himself on the ground in front of Jesus. And he gave him thanks and he gave him praise for what he had done. And then Jesus says this outstanding thing. He said, were there not 10 who were cleansed? Is that a rhetorical question, or does he just not know? He knew how many there were. I'm pretty sure he knew exactly how many. It's a rhetorical question. He says, were there not 10 who were cleansed? Where are the other 9? How many of you feel when you read this story that maybe, just maybe, Jesus was a little disappointed? How many think that? I think I'm correct in that interpretation. Jesus was profoundly disappointed. He says, were there not 10 that were cleansed? Where are the other 9? And the only one to return is this Samaritan. So Jesus is, definitively disappointed in the other 9. But he's happy about this one. He says, only a foreigner, only a Samaritan returns to give me thanks? Now here's my question for you. I'm going to really nail you on this. How many would like to think that you would have been the one to return? Yeah, of course we would. We all put up our hands for that. Yeah, sure, I'm there. But statistically, is it true? Would we have been the one? Statistically, we know 90% of us wouldn't have showed up. And I know we have a hard time believing that, but that's what the story reads. And that's why Jesus is so surprised. And so there's a lot of things we could appreciate. I could give you a big, long list, but I'm going to give you 3 things because that's how I preach, right? And so here they are. Here's the 3 things that I think are really, really important for us to be thankful for. Number one, to appreciate the blessedness of small things. Number two, to appreciate the kindness of others. Number three, to appreciate the greatness of God. And you know, I got a little story for you. So there was this family, they were traveling through Mexico, they had a tour guide, they came across this village on their tour, and it was kind of unique because there was these two streams coming out on the mountain, and one of them was a hot spring, and the other one was a cold spring. And the women of the village were washing their clothes in the hot water, and then just swinging them over to the other stream and rinsing them off in the cold water. And so this tourist said to the guide, "Oh, these folks must be very grateful that Mother Nature provides both hot and cold water." To which the guy said, "No, senor, there is much grumbling that she provides no soap." And you know, it's a funny thing how, you know, when we have the small blessings of life, how easy it is for us to miss what is in the midst of it, the good things that we have, the blessedness of small things. So a couple of weeks ago, I told you this. I kind of threw this curveball at you, and I told you that the opposite of faith was not unbelief. I told you the opposite of faith was what? It was fear. And the reason was because fear is the sort of, it's negative faith, and it's the opposite of faith. And so I'm going to give you another one of those today. You see, the opposite of gratitude is not ingratitude. Ingratitude means I just don't have gratitude. So if I'm over here in the world of gratitude and I'm thankful for things, that's one thing. We have the neutral, which is just being ungrateful or not grateful. But then on the other side of the continuum, we have grumbling. Grumbling is negative gratitude. Grumbling is complaining about what you don't have instead of being grateful for what you do. Are you following this? And if you don't know this, here's a little secret for you. God really hates grumbling. He hates complaining. There are all kinds of scriptures all the way through the Bible. There's all these scriptures about not grumbling. In fact, Philippians 2:14 says, "In all things do them without complaining." But see, let me ask you a question. Here we go. You ready for this one? How many of you know that person? You know the one. The one that it doesn't matter what's happening in their life, doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, they will have a complaint about it. How many of you know that person? Y'all know that person? Yeah. How many of you are that person? There's a few honest people who are putting up their heads. And see, I think this is our challenge in life, you know, that we always want what we don't have. And it was Marya Mannes who said this: the good life only exists when we stop wanting a better one. And I want you to think about something, because for those of us that live in Canada and North America, do we or do we not already live in the promised land? I mean, if there's a promised land in the world, isn't this it? Isn't Canada the promised land? This is going to be the interactive part. Work with me on this. We're going to do the interactive part of this sermon. Ready? I'm going to ask you a few questions. How many of you woke up this morning and you were not in a concentration camp? How many of you woke up this morning? Really? The other half of you woke up in a concentration camp this morning? I'm going to pray for you, you poor things. No, we woke up, we were free this morning. And this is going to be a little graphic, but I'm making a point here. How many of you went to the bathroom, did your business, and you flushed that toilet, and that waste of yours took off and went somewhere, and you'll never have to think about it again? How many of you had that experience this morning? Weren't you glad that you flush it? You should be giving your toilet a big hug every morning and say, "Thank you for dealing with this." And it just, where it goes, no one knows. Out it goes. You know, there are countries, and I've been to them, where you flush your toilet and then walk out in the street and you see it going by. And you go, "Oh my, I've seen that before." I am not joking. I'm not joking. Some of you have been to those countries and you know what I'm talking about. We have it so well. How many, after you did your business in the toilet, then you went to the sink and you turned on the tap, and out of that tap came fresh water that you could drink? How many had that experience this morning? How many of you then went to the fridge and there was so much food in that fridge that you had to decide what you were going to have for breakfast? How many had that experience? How many of you went to the doctor this year, sometime this year in the last 12 months or 2 years, you went to the doctor, and when you were done, they did not even present you with a bill. You just walked right out of the doctor. Every single one of you in this room. See, let me tell you what most people have. Do you know that only 10% 10% of our population of the world does not have fresh drinking water. 750 million people do not have fresh water to drink every morning. Do you know that 35% of people in the world do not have proper sewage like you do? Do you know that 50% of the world does not have access to medical care at all, let alone free? And I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. And we have so much, and for some reason, for some way, we have managed to begin to complain about this. The good life only exists when we stop wanting a better one. So I decided a long time ago that I was not only going to be content with the things in my life, the small blessings in my life, but I was going to be grateful for them. And I'm telling you, and I'm just not talking platitudes here, this is reality. It revolutionized my life. When I stopped wanting more and wanting the next gadget and the next TV and the next thing, it just revolutionized my life, and I can live in this sense of contentment and this sense of gratitude that's totally liberating. I mean, my phone, I've been using the same phone for 6 years. I've been driving the same vehicle for the last 18 years. I've been living in the same house for the last 30 years. I've been driving the same bicycle for the last 35 years. I've been married to the same woman for the last 38 years. I have a veteran pair of underwear that's over 40 years old, and I'm wearing it right now. That's way too much information, isn't it? Here's my point. Here's my point. I hope you're not missing it. The good life only exists when we stop wanting a better one. And what we need to do is start appreciating the blessedness of small things. And every one of us are surrounded with these things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to start appreciating the kindness of others. So I want to tell you a really interesting story. So a number of years ago, I took a mission trip, took a team from the church here. We went to central Mexico, way into the center of Mexico. Some of you are on that trip, so you remember this story. And we were in the high plains of the Sierra Madres, and we met a missionary couple there that dedicated their life to this people. Their names were Scotty and Phyllis, and they lived in this compound literally in the middle of nowhere. And Mexico is usually crowded. This was not crowded. You couldn't see any people anywhere. And we were going to go up to this village the next day, and this is what they said to us. They said, whatever you do when you meet these people, do not feel sorry for these people, because they do not feel sorry for themselves and they don't need your pity. So I thought, oh, I can do that. I don't have to feel sorry for those people. So the next day, we packed up the van, and we were going up into this mountain village, and we were going to add on to the church building that the missionaries had built up there. And so on top of the van, we had 2x4s and corrugated metal and different things. And so up the road we went, and the road went up an hour into the Sierra Madres to the very, very end of the road. It was the end of the road. And we went up this mountain road. I mean, we went across bridges that were nothing more than logs across the bridges. It was sort of terrifying, across these rivers, and up we went. We finally got there. We went up the road for an hour, but went back in time 1,000 years. And these people had no electricity. They had no running water. They had no vehicles. They had no farm equipment. They plowed with mules. They harvested and seeded by hand. They made bricks out of clay and baked them by the riverside. And this was the world that we encountered. They lived in homes that were literally made out of sticks. They were sticks like this, and they were bound together. And even in Mexico, I'd never seen living conditions like that. Anyway, we're up in this village. So we unloaded all the building supplies. And the first thing we were going to do was we were going to do a church service. We had arrived, so we did this church service. I preached to this group of people. And at the end of the message and stuff, and everybody had left and we prayed for people, I said to the missionary, I said, I have a question. As I looked out to that crowd, I saw men sitting by themselves and women sitting by themselves, children. I saw no couples. I said, why is there no couples sitting together in the church? Is it, because there was men there, where were their wives? There was women there, where were their husbands? And so he said, well, what I didn't tell you about this town is this is an outlaw town. And this is an outlaw town because it's so far into the mountains, so far at the end of the road, that if you're fleeing from the police, this is where you would flee. And the federales and the police, they will not follow you up to this place. And so pretty much everybody that's come here are criminals. And they're fugitives fleeing from the law. And so it's an outlaw town. And the reason the couples don't come to church together is because someone has to stay home and guard their house, or the neighbors will break in and steal everything. And I thought, really? I thought, who wants to live in this place? So anyway, the day ended, we went down the mountain, and the next day we came back, and we were going to start building and adding onto the church. And guess what happened to all the building supplies? They were all gone. They were all stolen, all of them. We said, where are the building supplies? They said, well, they stole them overnight while you were gone. They probably divvied them up. The missionary knew where to find them. I mean, there's nowhere to run, right? He says, I'll find them. You guys go do something else. So we went to the school, and we handed out soccer balls and Bibles, and we played with the kids all day and ministered to the kids. And we came back at the end of the day, and there were the building supplies. They were all back, stacked in exactly the same place that they were when we left them there. But now it's too late to build. So we came back the next day, third day, and we started adding on. We got started. We didn't get finished. And then we were having a big service, last service in this village. And so I thought to myself, I know exactly what to preach to these people. And I know what they need is to learn how to love their neighbor. Never mind loving your enemy. They just need to love their neighbor. And so I thought, I'm going to fix them. I'm going to give them a sermon like they've never heard before, loving their neighbor. And so anyway, that night the place is packed. It's standing room only, and there's people outside. There's no glass in the windows, but they're wide open. You can see the men standing out in the area beside the church building, and I preached my heart out. I thought, I'm going to fix these people. I'm going to single-handedly revolutionize this entire community in one evening. And so I preached on loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your might, all your soul, and all your strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself, the great commandment of God. And I preached this message, and when I was done, I thought, woo! Ow! And I thought, that was one good message. And the whole time, there was all these people listening to every word, and the men were outside, right outside the window here. And so then we were packing up, and we were all feeling pretty good about ourselves, me more than anybody. And we got into the van, and we turned the key, and we drove about 60, 80 feet, and the van quit. We looked at the needle, it was at empty. And while I was preaching on loving your neighbor, the men were out there siphoning the gas out of our vehicle. Are you ready for this? We had to buy the gas back from them to get down the stupid mountain. The whole time I'm driving down the mountain, I'm not feeling sorry for these people. I hate these people. And I was having such a hard time keeping a good attitude. I was thinking, why am I so mad about this? And it was because they did not appreciate the kindness of others. And we've all been there when we've done something, seen something, we've done something for someone else, and they did not appreciate it. We can't figure out why they don't appreciate it. You know, there was a day where if you were to ask your kids this, what's the magic word? They would say please or thank you. You know, today if you ask somebody what the magic word is, you know what they'd say? Abracadabra. That's what a kid would say today. And you know, things have really changed. How many remember the days, of those of you my age, how many remember the days we used to host a birthday party? This was a birthday party. You'd have hot dogs, cake, and a game of pin the tail on the donkey. I mean, you remember pin the tail on the donkey? For some of you that don't know this game, you had a picture of a donkey on the wall. You blindfold some 6-year-old kid, put a sharp object in his hand and say, go poke something. It's all fun and games until someone lost an eye, right? And you know, the whole birthday party cost you $8. And, you know, that was a birthday party. Do you think that's what a birthday party looks like today? Hello, think again. This is what a birthday party looks like today. You better have a cake that's a full-size replica of the Disney castle. You better have exotic, zoo animals there with a trainer. You better have helicopter or hot balloon rides, something like that. You better have bouncers. You better have clowns. You better have, Cirque du Soleil performing in your backyard. And when you're all done, you're going to have to give the kids a goodie bag, and in each goodie bag, they're going to have a PlayStation. And that's what it looks like today. And you're going to have to invite all 31 kids from the class, because that's just the way it is. You will have to take out a second mortgage on your house to pay for that birthday party. And when the kids leave, out of the 31 of them, 2 of them will say thank you. What is wrong with this world? And you know which 2 are going to say thank you, because you know their parents. And you know which parents drilled into them the need for thankfulness and gratefulness and to appreciate the kindness of others. And we have lost this art of appreciation in our culture. And if we can begin to appreciate others, I'm telling you, it'll revolutionize our world. But not only will it revolutionize our world, it'll actually revolutionize you. So let me tell you one little story about this. So how many of you know who Norman Vincent Peale is? Norman Vincent Peale, he wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And so that's what people really know him of, but I'll tell you, he was a pastor like I was, and he pastored a big congregation. And one day there was a man by the name of William Stidger, and William Stidger had once a very vital and energetic life, but now he found himself discouraged and depressed and struggling with life and anxiety, and he came to Norman Vincent Peale, and he said, Pastor, I'm so discouraged, I don't know what to do with my life. And he says to him, have you ever tried an attitude of gratitude? And he says, I don't know what an attitude of gratitude is. And he says, well, here, it's this simple. He says, why don't you find one person in your life that has made a significant difference in your life and you've never thanked them, and why don't you show that person appreciation and see what happens? So he sat down, he thought about it, and he remembered a school teacher they had way back when that really impacted his life. So he found out where the address was, and he sat down and he wrote this woman a letter, and he thanked her for the input of his life, in his life. She wrote him back. She's well retired at this point. And she wrote him back and said, in all the years of teaching, I've never, ever once had a student come back after the fact and thank me for the difference I've made in their life. She says, I read your letter every single day, and it has brought me great joy. When he saw the effectiveness of an attitude of gratitude, he wrote a second letter, and a third letter, and a fourth letter. By the end of his life, William Stidger had written over 500 thank you letters to people that had affected his life, and he lived a long and healthy life full of joy and full of peace because he had discovered the secret of appreciation and the attitude of gratitude. So the first thing is we appreciate the blessedness of small things. The second thing is we appreciate the kindness of others. And the last thing that I'm only going to spend a moment on, but you obviously know how important it is to appreciate the greatness of God. See, everything we have in our life, everything comes from Him. Every good and perfect gift comes down from above, from the Father of lights, from whom there is no variation nor shadow of turning. Every good thing, the very breath in your lungs, the friends that you have, the job you have, the paycheck you have, the home you live in, the car you drive, all these good things that we have in our life, every one of them at the end of the day has come from Him. And we never want to forget to appreciate the greatness of God. So I want to close with one final story. So almost 2 weeks ago, we had one of our Tuesday night events where we pray for people. And we had a young gal come up. She's one of our young adults, volunteer here in the church. Her name's Victoria. And she came up, and she was struggling with this Achilles tendon. She barely walked. She said she was in a 7 or 8 out of 10 in pain. She said, it's been bugging me for months. I can't walk. I can't barely walk. I can't run. And so we prayed for her. And I always like to make fun of people when I'm praying for people, because why not have a good time while you're doing it? And so I said, well, if God healed you, why don't you run around? She said, I don't know. I said, go, we'll do a run. So she ran around the room. Everybody watched her, and she ran around like this. And, you know, we like to, you know, public shaming is always fun. And so she's running around the room. She comes back, and I asked her, I said, how's your heel? And she says, I was able to run. I haven't been able to run for months. It was 2 out of 10 pain. It still hurt a bit, but just a little bit. So last Sunday, she comes up at the end of the service, and she says, Pastor Mark, and she's kind of welling up in tears in her eyes. And she says, I need to tell you something. And the next day I woke up, and the pain was completely gone in my Achilles tendon. And she said, I've been walking and running. She says, I'm completely pain-free for a whole week, and I just wanted to come and thank you. And I said, well, don't thank me. God healed you, not me. She says, I know that, and I'm so thankful to God, but she said, I needed to thank somebody. So I needed to come and actually thank somebody, so I'm going to thank you. I thought, okay, I'll take it. And I was so impressed because she was the 10th. She was the 1 out of 10 that returned to say thanks. And she was so broken and so moved in her heart that God, she says, I've never been healed before. I've been prayed for many times, but I've never been healed. And she says, I'm just so grateful, with tears in her eyes. And I thought, that's what I'm talking about. That's an attitude of gratitude. So how do we do this thing? We appreciate the blessedness of small things. We appreciate the kindness of others. We appreciate the greatness of our God. And then what we do is develop an attitude of gratitude, and it will change your life.
Church of the Rock has services every Sunday at 1397 Buffalo Place, and we invite you to join us when you're in the Winnipeg area. If you'd like a booklet to help you understand more about God's gift of forgiveness and reconciliation through Jesus Christ, please contact us, and we'd be happy to send you a free copy of the Book of Hope. Visit our website at www.churchoftherock.ca. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.